Hi guys, this is Extreme Ryan. Today's video is going to be about the Avogadro versus the Brutus. And this fight was an interesting one that I put in my community poll. I was thinking they might want this one just because it's very outlandish and out there. Not a lot of people talk about the Avogadro. A lot of people forget about him, including me sometimes in transit, because he's not really shown that much. He's kind of like, oh, a boss I have to deal with, and then just kind of get rid of him, and he won't show back up for a while. But the Brutus is more iconic, and I was trying to think of a character that had a melee attack that could potentially get rid of Avogadro. But thinking about this fight, the majority of what I was thinking of is, would the Brutus smacking Avogadro be enough to get rid of him? And then I realized he just kind of comes back over and over and over, the Avogadro does. Because you hit him, he just goes into like a weakened state. He goes just up into the sky, and he comes back a few rounds later just fine. And then I was also thinking, doesn't the Warden do the exact same thing in Mob of the Dead and Blood of the Dead? Because it's not as different Warden the entire time. I think Bill Ford makes that clear because they say, oh, the Warden's back, or how many times is he going to be back? I think implying that he's just one person, which does make sense about the storyline. But wouldn't he just come back an infinite number of times too? So it would just, the fight would be infinite. It would never end, because even if one always had an advantage, they would always come back and try to get him again. Or it was like they got the Avogadro won, then Brutus won, and then Brutus won again. But they have, like, you know what I mean? Like, would just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So there's a couple scenarios you could set up for this fight. You could say yes, they come back an infinite number of times, and they come back an infinite number of times, and it doesn't really matter where they are if that ability happens. Which in that case, it would just be an infinite draw, because neither one would lose, because they just come back again. Or you make it so if one dies, one's just out, which is what I'm going to be discussing in this video. I think that's a far more interesting idea, because the other one's just an infinite draw. There's nothing really to that fight, you could say. And by the way, I needed an Avogadro clip, so shout out to Annihilation Game, which I got this from YouTube. I needed one that just showed the Avogadro line enough for me to talk about it, and maybe some theater footage that wasn't just absolutely horrible, because BO2 theater footage isn't that great, and this shows him coming out the electric chamber, you could say. And I just think that's cool. I've never seen inside that thing. But, the scenario we're going to be discussing is if one dies once, it doesn't come back. Either the Avogadro kills Brutus and he does not come back, or the Brutus kills the Avogadro and he doesn't come back. Which, if we're taking those parameters into consideration, which we are in this, I guess you could put this in your head as they infinitely come back, and who would just win more fights if you think out of the span of time where they're alive, I guess you could say, or they're fighting. But for this, if one dies and is completely out, there's 2 or 3 questions that need to be answered. One is, can Bruce's club knock out the Avogadro, because it's technically a melee weapon, or does it have to have electricity on it, or be a different weapon that has electricity, which I don't know if they're recently Mob of the Dead. Maybe the lightning bolt can strike the club, I don't know, I'm just thinking of hypotheticals. And is the Avogadro's lightning ability, which will show right there, is that enough to one-shot him? Or is it just going to stun him and he's going to come back? And can the Avogadro just infinitely stun him to the point where he just can't move, and then he can maybe do something else? I'm not exactly sure what he would do, but just maybe something else. And if the Brutus strikes the Avogadro, would the Avogadro shock him back and kill him at the same time, so it's just a draw? Like, the Brutus hits the Avogadro, and then the Avogadro dies, but because he's electricity, and I'm pretty sure the Warden has metal all over his body through his clothing, does that just go onto him, and does he just shock to death, too? Is that the way it works, or is this a different scenario? And I think if the Brutus's little, I don't know what you call it, the stick that he has in the prison that he's holding the entire time that he uses to strike the player with, if that can knock out Avogadro, and since we're assuming he's not coming back, I think Brutus would win. If the Avogadro could just infinitely stun him, or if the lightning bolt would be enough to kill him, then I think Avogadro would win. And then if they just Brutus hits Avogadro, Avogadro shocks Brutus, it would just be a draw. Unless the Mangler, or not Mangler, sorry, I'm still thinking about my other video. Unless the Brutus could just tank it, and then I guess he would win. But I'm going to make a 1v1 edit now, just like all the other videos, and using their criteria, you could say. And just let me know in the comments down below if you agree with my opinions or not. But I just hope you enjoy the edit, and I'll make this into a short so you can just watch the 1v1 edit later if you want to.